Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Our Mox Masters CDH webcam tournament is this coming Saturday. It is 100% proxy friendly and is played in the comfort of your own home. There is $2,000 in prizes and payouts to top 16. We also pay out to top 32 in points towards our Mox Masters Invitational coming October 27th through the 29th. There are still some tickets left, so sign up today. This is high-powered CEDH. We wanted to showcase commanders and strategies that don't always fit at a CEDH table. There are so many cool high-powered decks out there that don't get to see enough play. We want to give those decks a real chance to shine, and that's what this series is all about. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon. We have tiers for all budgets, and you get all kinds of great perks in return. You can also check out our merchandise store for awesome accessories, including sleeves, playmats, dice, coins, and tokens. Any support goes a long way. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Charles piloting Balan, Wandering Knight. This is a Voltron list planning to win with commander damage, but can also make any creature in his deck a lethal threat loaded with equipment. Charles' opening hand contains the Swords to Plowshares, Armored Skyhunter, and 5 planes. Next, we have Josh piloting Wilson, Refined Grizzly with Folk Hero as the background. This is a Bear Storm deck that tries to cast as many bears as possible. Josh's opening hand contains a Jeweled Lotus, Verdant Catacombs, Green Sun Zenith, Llanowar Elves, Ashcote Bear, Balduvian Bears, and a Forest. After that, we have Alex piloting Intet the Dreamer. This is a Teamer Good Stuff deck that plans to cast free spells through its commander and win with big creatures. Alex's opening hand contains a Cephalid Coliseum, Gilded Lotus, Forest, Bloom Tender, Brain Freeze, Wheel of Misfortune, and a Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. Finally, we have Will piloting Krenko Mob Boss. This deck looks to generate way too many goblins and overload the board with goblin tokens. His opening hand contains a Lotus Petal, 2 Mountains, Grafdigger's Cage, Throne of the God Pharaoh, Wheel of Misfortune, and a Mana Echoes. Without further ado, let's initiate this illustrious idiosyncratic insurrection. Charles has the most text on all of his magic cards and gets to start us off. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He passes the turn. Josh draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Temple Garden onto the battlefield untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He casts his background, Folk Hero. He casts his commander, Wilson, Refined Grizzly. He ends his turn. Alex draws and plays a Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. He ships the turn to Will. Will draws and plays a Mountain. He casts a Grafdigger's Cage. He ends his turn. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He casts Umezawa's Jitte. He passes the turn. Josh draws and plays a Forest. He moves to combat and attacks Charles with Wilson. Charles takes it, and in his second main phase, Josh casts Balduvian Bears. Folk Hero triggers, and Josh draws a card. He ships the turn. Alex draws and plays a Cephalid Coliseum. He casts Bloom Tender. He passes the turn. Will draws and plays a Mountain. He casts Throne of the God Pharaoh. He ships the turn. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He casts Swords to Plowshares targeting Wilson. Ward triggers and Charles pays 2. Wilson is exiled and Josh gains 2 life. Charles passes the turn. Josh draws and plays a Forest. He casts a Llanowar Elves. He casts an Arbor Elf. He ends his turn. Alex draws and plays a Shivan Reef. He taps Cephalid Coliseum and Shivan Reef to help cast Dissipation Field. He passes the turn. Will draws and plays a Mountain. He casts a Lotus Petal. He cracks his Lotus Petal and casts his commander, Krenko Mob Boss. He ships the turn to Charles. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He casts his commander, Balan, Wandering Knight. He ends the turn. Josh draws and casts Mentor of the Meek. He ships the turn over to Alex. Alex draws and plays a Forest. He casts a Gilded Lotus. He passes. Will draws and plays a Mountain. He casts 1,000-Year Elixir. He activates Krenko and creates a Goblin. Will passes, Throne of the God Pharaoh triggers, and each of his opponents lose 1 life. The turn moves to Charles. Charles draws and plays a Plains. He casts Bloodforged Battle Axe. He casts Ring of Thune. He activates Balan to attach all equipment to his commander. He attacks Josh with Balan. Josh blocks with Balduvian Bears. The bear dies to first strike damage and GTA triggers, getting 2 charge counters. Charles passes the turn to Josh. Josh draws and plays a Forest. He recasts his commander, Wilson. Mentor of the Meek triggers, Josh pays and draws a card. Josh passes. At the end of Josh's turn, Charles removes the counter from GTA to give Bloom Tender -1/-1, killing it. Alex draws and plays a Volcanic Island. He casts Goblin and Archimancer. He taps Cephalid Coliseum and Shivan Reef to help cast his commander, Intet the Dreamer. He casts Beast Within, targeting Krenko. In response, Will activates 1,000-Year Elixir, untapping Krenko. He activates Krenko. In response, Charles removes the counter from GTA to give the Goblin token -1/-1, killing it. Then Krenko's ability resolves and Will creates a Goblin. Then Beast Within resolves, Krenko is destroyed, and Will creates a 3/3 Beast. Alex ships the turn. Will draws and casts Wheel of Misfortune. Charles chooses 3, Josh chooses 7, Alex chooses 8, and Will chooses 5. Alex takes 8 damage, then Josh, Alex, and Will discard their hands and draw 7. Will plays Cavern of Souls, naming Goblin as it enters. He casts Ashlene's Prerogative, choosing Even as it enters. He moves to combat and attacks Josh with the Beast. Josh takes it, and Will passes, Throne of the God Pharaoh triggers, and each opponent loses a life. He ends his turn. During Charles' upkeep, Ring of Thune triggers, and Balan gets a +1/+1 counter. He draws and plays a Plains. He casts Armored Skyhunter. Skyhunter enters and gains haste from Ashlene's Prerogative. He moves to combat and attacks Josh with Balan and Will with Skyhunter. Skyhunter triggers and Charles puts Cauldra Complete onto the battlefield equipped to Balan. Josh blocks with Mentor of the Meek, then Josh takes 9 trample damage from first strike. Bloodforge Battle Axe triggers and Charles creates a copy of the axe. Jitte triggers and gets 2 more charge counters. Charles decides that 20 commander damage is enough and states that he wants to see the Bears deck do bear things, so he doesn't kill Josh. Then Josh takes 11 more damage and Will takes 3. Battle Axe triggers and Charles creates another copy. Jitte triggers and gets 2 more charge counters. Charles passes. At the end of Charles' turn, Josh casts Worldly Tutor, fetching up a Beast Whisperer onto the top of his library. Josh draws and casts Utopia Sprawl, naming White as it enters. He casts Beast Whisperer. He casts Mass Vandal. Beast Whisperer and Folk Hero trigger, and Josh draws 2. Mass Vandal triggers, and Josh exiles Bolduvian Bears from his graveyard, exiling Cauldra Complete. Josh passes. At the end of Josh's turn, Charles removes 2 charge counters from Jitte to kill Goblin and Narcomancer. Alex draws and plays a Forest. He moves to combat and attacks Charles with Intet. Charles takes it, and Intet triggers. Alex exiles a card from the top of his library face down. In his second main phase, he casts Niv Mizzet Parun from exile for free through Intet. He ships the turn. Will draws and plays a Mountain. He casts his commander, Krenko. He activates Krenko, and in response, Charles removes a counter from Jitte to kill the Goblin token. Then Krenko's ability resolves and Will creates a Goblin. Will passes, Throne triggers, and each opponent loses a life. Also during Will's end step, Alex casts Return of the Wild Speaker. Niv Mizzet triggers, Alex draws a card, Niv triggers again, and Alex deals 1 damage to Krenko. Then Return resolves and Alex draws 6 cards. Niv triggers 6 times, dealing 6 to Balan, killing it. The turn moves to Charles. Charles draws and casts the Restoration of Iganjo, getting its first counter. Charles fetches up a Plains into his hand. He plays a Plains for turn. He equips Ring of Thune to Skyhunter. He equips Jitte to Skyhunter. He moves to combat and attacks Will with Skyhunter. Skyhunter triggers and Charles puts Loxodon Warhammer onto the battlefield, equipped to Skyhunter. Will takes 6 damage and Charles gains 6 life. Jitte triggers and adds 2 charge counters. Charles passes the turn to Josh. Josh draws and casts Eternal Witness. Beast Whisperer triggers and Josh draws. Eternal Witness enters and Josh returns Worldly Tutor from his graveyard to his hand. He casts Runeclaw Bear. Folk Hero and Beast Whisperer trigger and Josh draws 2. He plays a Forest for turn. He passes, discarding to hand size. Alex draws and Niv triggers, dealing 1 to Charles. In his main phase, Alex pays 2 life to cast Gitaxian Probe, targeting Will. Niv triggers, Alex draws, Niv triggers again, and deals 1 to Charles again. He then looks at Will's hand and draws a card. Niv triggers, dealing 1 to Charles. He casts Kodama of the East Tree. He plays a Training Center as his land for turn. Kodama triggers, and Alex puts an island onto the battlefield. He casts a Felwar Stone. Kodama triggers, and Alex puts Arcane Signet onto the battlefield. He moves to combat and attacks Will with Intet. Will takes it, and Intet triggers. Alex pays and exiles the top card of his library face down. He suspends Search for Tomorrow. He casts a Finehorn Elves. Kodama triggers and he puts Elvish Mystic onto the battlefield. Alex ends his turn. Will draws and plays a Mountain. He activates Krenko, creating 2 1/1 goblins. He activates Thousand Year Elixir, untapping Krenko. He activates Krenko, creating 4 goblins. He moves to combat and attacks Charles with everything. Charles blocks a goblin with Skyhunter, and then he takes 9 and then gains 6 life through lifelink. Will passes, Throne triggers, and each opponent loses 8 life. He passes the turn. During Charles' upkeep, Ring of Thune triggers and Skyhunter gets a +1/+1 counter. He draws and Restoration of Iganjo gets another counter. He discards Argentum Armor and then returns nothing. He casts Mantle of the Ancients, targeting Skyhunter. Mantle triggers and puts Argentum Armor onto the battlefield attached to Skyhunter. He equips Bloodforge Battle Axe to Skyhunter. He moves to combat and attacks Alex with a fully loaded Skyhunter. Argentum Armor triggers and Charles destroys Dissipation Field. Alex blocks with Niv Mizzet and Kodama. Before damage, Josh casts Beast Within, targeting Jitte. Niv triggers and Alex draws. Niv triggers again and deals 1 damage to Charles. In response, Charles removes 3 counters from Jitte, killing Krenko. Then he removes 2 counters from Jitte to kill 2 goblins. Then Jitte is destroyed and Charles creates a 3/3 beast. Then Niv Mizzet and Kodama die, Alex takes 8 damage and Charles gains 19 life. Battle Axe triggers and Charles creates a copy. With nothing else, Charles passes the turn. At the end of Charles' turn, Josh casts Worldly Tutor, fetching up a Karamitra's Acolyte onto the top of his library. Josh draws and casts Karamitra's Acolyte. Beast Whisperer triggers and Josh draws. It enters and gains haste through Ashlene's Prerogative. He taps Acolyte for 11 green and casts Temur Sabertooth. Beast Whisperer triggers and Josh draws again. He activates Sabretooth, returning Acolyte to his hand. He recasts Acolyte. He presents a loop of casting, tapping, bouncing, and recasting Karamicha's Acolyte, netting more and more green mana with each iteration. Each iteration, he also draws a card through Beast Whisperer. He casts Eternal Witness. Witness triggers, returning Worldly Tutor to his hand. He casts Worldly Tutor, fetching up Ayula, Queen Among Bears, onto the top of his library. He casts Great Oak Guardian. Beast Whisperer triggers, and Josh draws. Great Oak Guardian triggers, and all of his creatures get +2/+2 and untap. He activates Sabretooth, returning Beast Whisperer to his hand to avoid decking himself. He activates Sabretooth, returning Great Oak Guardian to his hand. He presents a loop of bouncing and recasting Great Oak, making all of his creatures infinitely large. He casts Ayula, Queen Among Bears. He presents another loop of bouncing a bear and triggering Ayula's ability, fighting every creature his opponents control with the rest of his infinitely large army while using Sabretooth to bounce a bear over and over. He then loops Eternal Witness with Sabretooth to get back Beast Within over and over, destroying every permanent his opponents control except Ashling's Prerogative. He then uses Ayula to fight every beast token with his large army by bouncing a bear over and over. With his opponents having no permanents in play except Prerogative and giving his creatures haste, Josh attacks everyone for massive damage, and Josh wins the game. Wow, what a great game. Congratulations to Josh on his surprising victory. Each deck got to do something big and powerful. While Charles could have eliminated 2 players, he was so focused on not losing to Krenko that he gave Josh the chance to find his combos and finish the game seemingly out of nowhere. The most valuable card in tonight's game, sponsored by Luxury Playstyle, goes to Ashling's Prerogative. It allowed for Armored Sky Hunter to attack right away and give Charles a huge boost early on, and it enabled a surprise combo from Josh at the end of the game. What else would you like to see? A certain commander? A certain strategy? Something else? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.